Share via email. Report story. Chapter 9. Ochako's alarm rang as it always did, waking her up suddenly. She got out of bed fairly quickly, which was unusual for her, especially since she had to go to work. She stretched a bit as she got off the bed, heading to the shower to start her day. As much as she liked her work, it was still a pain getting up so early in the morning, especially after a long weekend like that. But this one felt different. She practically skipped around her apartment as she thought of the past few days with Izuku. The warmth of his chest when they had slept, the softness of his lips, his tight embrace. All of these were things Ochako knew she would never get enough of. It was almost addictive. She quickly got dressed and headed out. The rain from the day before had stopped overnight, leaving only a bright early morning sunshine and a few clouds instead. She walked in the opposite direction to her work, back the same way she had come the day before. This was a relatively new part of her morning routine. She had picked it up all those months ago when she had first started visiting the wonderful bakery owned by that cute boy that never failed to make her smile and blush in equal amounts. As soon as she turned the corner, her face lit up with joy at the sight of the bakery. Even though it had only been one night since the events that made her cheeks turn pink just by thinking about them, she still missed Izuku and was excited to see him once again. She entered through the door and noticed that the small bakery was packed with customers. This wasn't a rare occurrence, but she found it odd how everyone was just standing around with their coffees, Izuku nowhere to be seen. A few of them recognized Ochako and gave bright smiles to her. She felt flattered and waved back, before moving to the kitchen on the other room. As she walked, she noticed that there were no baskets around the store and that the shelves were effectively empty, except for a single tray on the central table, which had nothing on it but leftover glaze stuck to it. Izuku, Ochako said casually as she entered the kitchen, the awkwardness from calling his name completely removed and instead replaced with a feeling of confusion at the bakery's current state. Yes, she heard the familiar voice call from the other side of the kitchen, "I'll be right there." Ochako looked around the kitchen. It was, simply put, a complete mess. There were traces of flour everywhere, opened books on the sides, oven trays with dough and other things she did not recognize, and many pieces of discarded dough everywhere, the trash can already full of it, as well as different attempts at colored glaze. Izuku ran up in front of Ochako, but his back to her as he looked in the oven for the bread that was baking. He ran around the kitchen as he tried to cook various things at once, stopping to read the books every other minute. What happened here? Ochako asked. Why are there so many people outside? Izuku ran back to the oven and opened it. He took out the tray of fresh bread and prepared the basket quickly. Ochako, he said as if surprised by her presence, what are you doing here? I came here to look for you. She said matter-of-factly, there's a ton of people waiting outside. Oh no, Izuku said before running over to the other side of the kitchen, where something was cooking in the fire. Ochako took the basket herself and took it outside to the waiting customers. She handed it out and made sure everyone paid before leaving, but there were still many more customers that were left without anything. Izuku. She ran back to the kitchen. What are you even doing? He didn't look at her as he flipped something in the pan, trying to get through it as fast as he possibly could. Ochako ran over to him and put out the fire. Promoted stories. You'll also like. After all. Fluke 11.4K 802. Will edit once I'm free. N. This is a work of fiction, and any similarity with other works is purely coincidental. Excuse grammatical errors and misspellings, Eng. Return of Mokuden discontinued 3.5K45. This story is officially up for adoption. If anyone is interested, message me or comment on the story. Much needed love Yandere Succubus Momo X Izu 50.9K797 after Wattpad had decided to delete this story out of nowhere. I and many reader were distraught. So I'm making a remake of the story from the ground up to compensate. Feelings. Izawa. X-Reader 57.1K1.3 KRE posting. This until I edit it, sorry if it's not good, it's my first time writing a story. You enroll at UA and you have multiple quirks you are really good at using, why? Izuku's Harem Academia 185K 1.7 Qst. Read. I am. Sequel of. You are check mark 69.4K 1.8K. This book is the sequel of. You are so better read that first before going here. Tears of joy, tears of joy. Thank you to that one reader that suggested this title. I can't see you sad face, but thank you. Own Fluke a day 112K 8.2 kilo amperes. Collection of short Own Fluke over 365 days. Please check the second book for the rest of the day's update. Hey, Izuku said, finally looking up at her. Why'd you do that? Because there are customers outside waiting to be sold their bread. Ochako almost yelled. What are you even doing in here? The place is a mess. Izuku finally looked around him at the disastrous kitchen, realizing his mistake. He ran over to the oven and placed as much bread as he could in the trays, hoping that it would be enough. He then proceeded to walk outside the kitchen and apologize to everyone there for the delay, and that everything should be ready in the next 15 minutes. He walked back into the kitchen and supported himself on the nearest table before letting out a long, stressed sigh. Ochako moved next to him and wrapped an arm around him, resting her face on his shoulder. What happened? She asked, calmer than before. She looked up at him and noticed Izuku had a hand over his face, so she couldn't see it properly. I dunno, he said, almost sounding like a chastised child. I just wanted to make other things and I guess I got carried away. Ochako couldn't help but laugh at this. All of her worries washed away by the fact that Izuku was okay, and was still himself. She then wrapped her other arm around him and embraced the boy she loved. What did you even try to make? She asked. Now that she wasn't worried, curiosity took over her. Well, nothing too extravagant. Izuku took his hand off his face to start counting. That's when Ochako noticed the dark lines under his eyes. Cupcakes, a chocolate cake, pancakes, more cinnamon rolls, and I was also making an omelet when you turned off the fire. Have you ever made any of those? She asked, incredulous, except for the cinnamon rolls, of course. Not really, he responded, probing his brain for any forgotten memories. When did you start making them? She continued to interrogate him. Well, after I dropped you off, I saw a cooking shop was open, he recalled, so I went in and brought a few books. A few? Ochako asked as she gazed at the many books scattered around the kitchen. Yeah, he said innocently, and then I started making them until now. Wait, you didn't stop at all in the night? She asked, incredulous to the idea. You haven't slept at all? No, Izuku said, remorse filling his voice. Sorry. Ochako started, but couldn't find it in herself to be mad at him. The whole situation just made her love his hardworking side even more. I love you, you idiot. Izuku wasn't able to get a word out of himself for the next minute, too stunned at what Ochako had just said. She noticed he wasn't going to talk anytime soon and chose to hug him, placing her head on his warm neck. Izuku finally managed. I love you too, Ochako. It was Ochako's turn to be flustered, but she didn't want to show it, so instead, she just tightened her grip on him. Izuku finally responded by putting both of his arms around her, embracing her as well. They stayed that way for a bit until the ringing sound coming from the oven let them know that the bread was ready to be served. Neither of them wasted any time as Izuku opened the oven and took out the tray, looking at each bread to see if it was good enough to be served, while Ochako grabbed the baskets and prepared them. Both of them placed the hot bread on the baskets with caution, and let them cool off for a bit before taking them outside, where the customers were waiting. They managed to sell to every customer just narrowly, leaving them with just one piece after everyone had paid. They were both tired from the work and took the time to sit down for a bit. Izuku was especially tired and was almost dozing off in his seat, which worried Ochako. "Excuse me," she said out loud, trying to get everyone's attention. "I regret to inform you that the bakery will not open this afternoon because the owner is in no condition to tend to the store. We appreciate your comprehension." Ochako was very used to giving out instructions like this, as she was often tasked to do in her various missions to keep civilians calm or in line. A general approval was heard from the crowd, though there were some small groans in between. "And also, as we are out of products to sell, we will close the store early today." This caused everyone to make their way out slowly, thanking them for the delicious bread. Some even were eating some already. Satisfied with her work, Ochako closed the door and then went back to the sleepy Izuku. As she approached him, he looked up at her from his chair, puzzled. "Why did you do that?" he asked, without any sort of attack in his voice. Instead, Ochako thought there was some relief instead. "Because you need to rest." She kissed his forehead, "and there isn't any dough for the afternoon." "But I'm all right," he protested. His voice still showed clear signs of sleepiness. "No, you're not," she retaliated. "Now you need to go rest, Izuku." "Fine," he said as he stood up, finally giving in. Ochako took his hand and went upstairs with him, leading him to his room. She made him lie down and then covered him with a blanket. She sat down next to him and placed a hand on his hair. "I have to go to work now," she said, a tinge of sadness in her voice. "I'll be back later, okay?" Izuku could only nod as sleep had almost completely enveloped him. She giggled and kissed his forehead, before getting up and heading to the door. She realized she had never paid much attention to Izuku's room, and took the chance to take a look around it. It was mostly bare, but there was one poster on the wall, which was in tatters and held together barely with tape. It showed the number one hero, All Might, who was also her old teacher at UA. Memories flooded her head of his classes. He was one of the best teachers she ever had. She briefly wondered if Izuku was a fan of his before she realized it was already 11 am and her work started in 30 minutes. She rushed out the door and ran towards her workplace. Soon after, she had made it. She had arrived minutes before her usual arriving hours, and though she was panting from running so fast, she had made it. "Ochako," a familiar voice said from behind her. She turned around and saw the dark-haired girl running towards her. A smile spread across her face. "Suyu." Ochako laughed as she embraced her friend. "It's been a while." They made their way to their desks, and both took a cup of coffee. Before doing so, they talked about what had happened in Ochako's absence and what she had done on her birthday. "And how are things with him?" "Ribbit," Suyu asked with a smirk on her face. "Who's him?" Ochako responded, puzzled. "You know," Suyu teased, "Midoriya." "Oh," Ochako realized, then blushed a deep red. "It's been well, I guess." "What do you mean well?" "Ribbit. We baked together," she said. hoping Suyu would stop asking. And, I know there's more ribbit. We. She realized it was pointless to struggle, but couldn't quite manage to say it, kissed. I knew it, Suyu said with a satisfied smile. And where were you yesterday? I thought you said you were coming back on Tuesday, ribbit. Ochako's eyes widened and she dropped her coffee cup on the ground, which Suyu saved with a quick reaction using her tongue. She had completely lost track of time when she was with Izuku and had completely forgotten that she was supposed to work the day before. Don't worry about it, ribbit, it was a slow day anyway. Ochako couldn't believe it. She used the first opportunity she could to apologize to 13 and the rest of her coworkers, which had heard her conversation with Suyu and were amused by the fact that Izuku had been the reason. Dash 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 dot. Izuku woke up near 5 p.m. He had slept wonderfully and was full of energy for the rest of the day. He recalled the morning's events and grew embarrassed when he realized he had kept all of his costumers waiting only because he wanted to bake other things. At least he thought they had enjoyed the cinnamon rolls he had served in the morning, even if there weren't many of them. He got up and stretched a bit before heading downstairs and started to clean the mess that was his kitchen. He threw all of the discarded dough away and tried his best to clean all of the different colored glazes from the floor and tables. After what felt like an eternity, he was finally done with cleaning. He sat down in one of his chairs and rested, his muscles aching from the intense scrubbing he had done everywhere. He had also organized the books and taken them up to his room. This had proved difficult as Izuku didn't quite remember why he had bought so many books and how had he carried them back home that night. Soon after he was done, he heard a knock on his door. Coming, he said as he emerged from the kitchen and went to open the door. When he did, Ochako was standing there, her face lit up when she saw him. Izuku. She jumped into his arms and embraced him tightly, then giggled. Oh Ochako. Hey, he said as he held her in his arms, breathing in her wonderful scent. I trust that you rested. I did. I just finished cleaning the kitchen too. Hum. Ochako looked at him in the eye, as if trying to spot if he was lying to her or not. Why yes, Izuku asked. Her gaze was intense and he couldn't help but feel a bit embarrassed by it. Ochako decided that he was telling the truth and gave him a small peck on the lips as a reward. His cheeks turned bright pink, but he kept his composure somewhat this time. I don't have any bread right now. Izuku lamented. I could go cook something else if you'd like. I'm fine, she said with a smile. I actually wanted to talk to you about something. What is it? He asked, offering Ochako a seat. Well, today you were really careless. She started, causing Izuku to look at the floor in shame, and it would have been worse if I hadn't come and stopped you. Thank you for that, he said, still looking down. So I decided, with your permission of course, she smiled brightly, that I want to help you out in baking new stuff. Izuku looked up almost immediately, his face a mix of surprise and happiness. But you already have a job. I told 13 about my idea and he let me have a later shift, from 1 in the afternoon until 8. But I can manage. I don't want you to force yourself to work here out of pity. It's not out of pity, you dummy, she said, getting up from her seat and closer to him. It's because baking is fun and I want to do it more with you. But what about the mornings? He asked. You'd need to come here really early. I thought about that as well, she said, and I wanted to ask if I could stay the night here. Like every night, he asked, completely shocked at the proposal. Ochako only nodded in response, her face a deep shade of red. I know it's too surprising, and I can manage if you don't want me to stay, but I just thought. I'd love that, Izuku said confidently, without stuttering and interrupting her. Really? She asked him. She hadn't expected this. I would love to wake up next to you, he said honestly, his face now turning the same shade as Ochako's. Don't you think it's too soon? She asked, wanting to make sure he wanted this as much as she did. Don't mind, he said. I like the idea. Both of them stood there for a while, unable to look at each other's eyes until Ochako started laughing. What's so funny? Izuku asked her, but still glad she had broken the silence. You're just really cute when you blush. Why you were blushing too? He accused her. And no, I wasn't. But she very clearly was. When they had finally settled, they had gone out to Ochako's apartment and packed clothes for her. They couldn't be bothered to take the rest that day. They were exhausted and decided to come back for them in the coming days. They headed back to the tiny bakery and walked in, then proceeded to go up the stairs and into Izuku's room. When they had already changed into their sleeping clothes, they realized that the bed was meant for one person, and Izuku blushed at the possibility of sleeping so close to Ochako. I can sleep on the couch, he claimed. That way you'll be comfortable. He started heading out the door but was stopped by Ochako, who held him back by his arm. He turned around and saw her looking down. She started. I want to sleep with you. Izuku was stunned for a moment, but he was happy as well. He had wanted that too. Oh, okay, he said as they both headed to the tiny bed in the corner of the room. They lay down next to each other, both of them looking away. It had been the first time they slept together in an actual bed and not the couch. Izuku tried to sleep but couldn't, with someone like Ochako being in the same bed as him. Hey Izuku, he heard after a while. He guessed that Ochako wasn't able to sleep as well. Why yes. Chi turned around. He did as he was asked and found Ochako facing him as well. His heart skipped a beat and he couldn't move, but Ochako took the initiative and moved closer. Wrapping her arms around him and pressing her head gently against his chest. He finally reacted and put an arm under her head and the other over her shoulder, pulling her closer softly. Good night Izuku, she said. Good night Ochako, he said. I love you too. Soon after, they fell asleep in each other's warm embrace. Chapter 10. Even though she had multiple layers of blankets over her, Ochako felt strangely cold. She raised her head slightly and peered out the window. The snow covered everything in sight and continued to fall slowly. The sun's first rays of light were just now making their way into the room. Something was missing, she thought. Something she probably had with her all through the night. It took Ochako a second to realize that she wasn't in her apartment and another minute for her to fully recall what had transpired only days prior. Only then did she realize exactly what she was missing. Izuku, she said softly to herself, where are you? She missed his warmth. She missed resting her head on his chest as he slept, the way he would absent-mindedly pass his fingers through her hair, only hearing his calm breathing after a long day of working in his bakery. She wondered why was it that Izuku wasn't with her at that moment, enjoying the cold morning with her head nestled in the curve of his neck. She hugged the only pillow the narrow bed had and thought loving thoughts about Izuku. Her eyelids closed slowly as these thoughts gently made Ochako fall asleep, but it wasn't long before she heard a loud noise from the kitchen downstairs. Oh no, she exclaimed, sitting up instantly. I was supposed to help Izuku out baking. Ochako got up as quickly as she could, not even minding the sudden change in temperature as she exited the blankets. She ran out of the room and downstairs, already thinking up multiple apologies to say to Izuku. I'm sorry, she exclaimed as she practically sprinted into the kitchen. I completely forgot that I was going to help and it's my fault because I fell asleep and. It's okay. Izuku interrupted so Chako would stop berating herself. The dough is rising right now, but you can help me kneading it afterward. He went over to her and gently hugged her, kissing her forehead afterward. Good morning. He spoke with a smile upon his lips. Gee, good morning. Ochako replied, placing her head on Izuku's chest. It was warm, and even though the kitchen's ovens were slowly heating up the room, it was still cold in there. You must be freezing, Izuku realized soon after, as she was only wearing her pajamas that certainly were not meant for such temperatures. Here, this way. He held her hand and led her upstairs, leaving her in the tiny living room while he went inside their bedroom. It hadn't been long since Ochako had moved in with Izuku, and her work demanded so much time that she hadn't been able to take many of her clothes with her. She had planned on doing it that day since she had taken the day off, but she had not expected the weather to be so cold. Here. Izuku said coming out of the bedroom, it's all I have. Sorry. In his arms was a large hoodie with a pattern Ochako recognized as All Might's, one of her former teachers at UA. She couldn't help but giggle as she realized it had the same pointy yellow hairs on the hood as the retired pro hero had on his head. I've had this for a while, but it should fit you well. Where did you get it? She asked, curious. I waited in line for hours when I was little with my mom. In the end, we could only get one of the larger sizes, it was limited edition. Ochako couldn't help but laugh at the thought of a young Izuku wearing a hoodie 4 sizes too big for him, trying to roleplay as the previous #1 hero. Hey, come on, Izuku said, his head dropping a little. I really wanted to be a hero like him when I was little. This statement took Ochako by surprise, making her abruptly stop her laughter. She had forgotten that Izuku had no quirk at all, not even a minor one like most people. She realized how he probably had given up on his dream in order to keep his mother's bakery running and got closer to him, grasping the hoodie. Thank you, Izuku, she said, planting a small kiss on his lips. Let's see how it fits. A smile, along with a small blush, returned to Izuku's face when he saw Ochako wearing the hoodie. It was still a little oversized for her, but she looked incredible wearing it, rendering him completely speechless. So, Ochako teased, how do I look? You look. Izuku paused as he got closer to her, incredible. Now it was her turn to blush. She wasn't expecting such a straightforward answer from him at all. Anyway, she approached Izuku, trying to hide her embarrassment. We should go knead the bread. All right, he replied, his work mentality hiding his own blush. Let's get to work. They headed downstairs and into the kitchen, which was noticeably warmer than before with the ovens heating up. Izuku fetched Ochako's apron and she quickly put it on. He then took out the dough and handed some to her. Both of them started kneading it at the same time, albeit Ochako did a little slower than Izuku, but she had improved a lot since the last time she had done it. Soon after they put the dough inside the oven and got started on baking the cinnamon rolls and cake. While Izuku was working to introduce new pastries into his bakery, it took more time and effort than he originally thought, so he had settled with baking pastries he already had before. This time, the process was extremely faster than the last times Izuku had tried to bake these pastries. With Ochako's help and his own experience, they were able to finish preparing them in no time. They took the bread out of the oven and Izuku started preparing the baskets that were going to go on the shelves. Ochako helped by putting the pastries on a separate shelf dedicated to them. After all of this was done, Izuku and Ochako finally opened the doors to the bakery, welcoming customers who had been outside. We have some new items for you today. Ochako cheered as customers walked inside. The variety is still low, but please tell us your suggestions for anything else you'd like to see. Izuku did as he had always done and served coffee for everyone who wanted a cup. Meanwhile, Ochako walked over to the cash register and started helping everyone who wanted to pay. In one of his various trips to the kitchen, Izuku glanced towards the shelf with the pastries and was surprised to find it nearly empty. It hadn't been more than over an hour, but it was clear that the customers had very much enjoyed Izuku and Ochako's baking. Some customers were even eating their purchases not long after paying for them. Ochako's face lit up every time a customer came to the cashier with nothing in their hand but the cinnamon rolls she had helped create and put out. Once the shop was reasonably full of customers, Izuku called everyone's attention for a moment. "Excuse me," he said as the bakery fell silent. "Unfortunately, we will not be open this afternoon, but tomorrow we'll have double the pastries to make up for it." There were some mumbles of displeasure, but overall everyone seemed to be unbothered and simply resumed their shopping. It wasn't long before the shop was completely sold out. Izuku stood next to the door waiting for the last clients to leave before closing up the shop completely. "That was a complete success," Ochako exclaimed, looking over the sales they had made. The pastries were gone in an instant. "I'm sure it was because you helped to make them," Izuku said as he came closer to her. "They looked incredible." "I'm sure it was because they're from your bakery," Ochako countered. "I mean, you taught me how to make them after all." "That's true." Izuku thought for a bit, "but I'm still going with my answer." Ochako giggled and hugged him tightly. She was a bit tired because of everything she had done, and it surprised her that it was still early in the morning. She melted in his arms and was smiled brightly. She was simply happy she had helped Izuku and that everything had been a complete success. Izuku placed his head on hers, feeling similarly tired yet fulfilled. "Oh, by the way," Ochako said below him, "why are you not opening the shop in the afternoon?" "You know I'm off of work today." "I did know that," Izuku replied with a grin on his face. "That's exactly why I'm not opening in the afternoon, to help you get your stuff." Ochako had been planning to do that by herself later that day, while Izuku was busy with tending to the shop. She knew that in the afternoon the shop was much more relaxed than it was in the morning, so she knew Izuku would be able to manage without her. She was surprised at his sudden announcement but by no means upset about it. She was instead very happy she would be able to spend the whole day with her love. They took off their overalls and went upstairs to shower and change their clothes. It was when he was showering that Izuku realized he would be visiting Ochako's apartment for the first time. He hadn't actually thought about it before that moment, and now he felt excited yet anxious about it. He didn't really understand why Ochako had been living with him for a bit, so him going to her place wasn't something to be excited about. After both of them were ready, they left the bakery and made their way through the snow-covered streets. "Hey Izuku," Ochako asked. "Why yeah," he responded, a little blush on his cheeks as he still wasn't used to being called that way. "My hand is a little cold." She looked down with her cheeks heating up. Oh, okay." Izuku stuttered. "You want me to?" Ochako just nodded quickly as a response, leading Izuku to slowly hold out his hand for her. She took it and held it tightly in hers. She wasn't able to look up at him, nor could Izuku look down to her as they were both too embarrassed to do so. It took a while, but both of them finally regained their composure and were able to talk normally again in between them. It took even more for them to become comfortable and not embarrassed at what they were doing in public. But they had managed both by the time they arrived at Ochako's apartment. Izuku looked everywhere as he walked in. He didn't exactly know what to expect. but it wasn't anything special. Instead, it was just basic. It had all the necessary equipment for one person to be able to live there, but there wasn't much more apart from that. Nowhere in the apartment were there posters or photos like the ones Izuku and his mother had in their home. There wasn't even a television or anything of the sort, just a laptop with a desk sitting on one side of her room. He wondered why everything looked this way. Surely she would have enough with her job to purchase various comforts or at least a more spacious apartment, as this one only had 2 rooms. It's not much I know, Ochako said. I only have things I need here. Izuku wondered why this was the case, but decided not to pry. It wasn't any of his business after all. Ochako seemed to read his thoughts, as he answered his question without even him asking. I'm saving up as much as I can, she said looking down. I want my parents to have a comfortable life, so I want to give them what they deserve. He then understood why she lived that way and admired her for it. He then stood in front of her and wrapped his arms around her. She wasn't sad or in need of a hug, but she appreciated it anyway and reciprocated. There's not much to pack anyway, so we'll be, she tried to say but was interrupted by Izuku. Hey, Ochako. Why yeah, keep doing your best, okay. His words were too much for her to bear, causing her to break down in his arms. He simply held her close and let her get rid of everything that had been piling up in her life. She couldn't answer him without her voice breaking, so she nodded quickly in response. They stood that way for a while until Ochako regained her composure. She finally looked up at Izuku, who was smiling at her. She gazed deep into his eyes, seeing a familiar expression, but she could not exactly pinpoint where she had seen it. It didn't take her long to realize that his expression told her that he understood her struggles, as he had gone through something similar himself. She thought about Izuku's mother and everything he had sacrificed in order to keep her dream alive. She thought about how he gave up on being a hero and simply resigned to live his life keeping afloat what his mother had built. Izuku, she finally was able to say. Yes, I love you so much. I love you too, Ochako. He responded for the very first time without stuttering. They held each other in their arms for a while before realizing that they were taking way too long doing a task that should have taken them no more than 10 minutes. So they set themselves to work. After they had gathered all of Ochako's clothes and her small amount of valuables, they headed back to Izuku's bakery, where they unpacked everything. Finally, after such a long day, they laid down on their bed. Ochako snuggled up close to Izuku and rested her head on his chest, faintly feeling his heartbeat. She was very warm and cozy, completely countering the snow that still covered everything outside. She wanted nothing more than to stay there forever, for that one moment to never end. But, much to her displeasure, she remembered something she had to take care of before sleeping. She reluctantly started getting up from the bed and away from the pure heaven that was resting with her loved one. Ochako, Izuku asked, where are you going? I'll be back in a little bit, she said before yawning. I have to make a call to my workplace first. Oh, okay, Izuku responded, I'll wait. She left the room with her cell phone in hand. Izuku watched her leave and could not stop thinking about her afterward. It was the first time since she had moved in that he was in his bed alone, which caused the situation to suddenly hit him. He was currently living with the girl he loved, and the craziest part about the whole situation was that she loved him back. He never would have thought such a thing was possible for him. Izuku was still astounded by how bizarre the situation seemed to him when Ochako came back into the room. He didn't snap out of his thoughts until Ochako poked his nose with her finger, surprising him enough to cause him to recoil. Are you okay? Ochako asked. not able to contain her laughter. You seemed like you were in some faraway planet, you know. Did I? Izuku said, embarrassed. Sorry. I was just lost in my thoughts. It's okay. Ochako smiled as she once again placed her head on Izuku's chest. Don't worry about it. Oh, okay. He replied. By the way, what did your workplace need at this hour? Don't worry about it, Ochako said while dozing off. I told you already. Izuku was confused by her statement but did not press the issue further. Instead, he closed his eyes and went to sleep as well. As he would every morning, Midoriya Izuku would get up early to start preparing the bread for his own bakery. Except that, for a while now, he wasn't alone when doing so. He was now accompanied by Uraraka Ochako, who would wake up next to Izuku and help with baking some of the pastries before heading out to work at her hero agency. While Izuku let the dough for the bread rise, he decided that he would make the day extra special for Ochako. Since he had time, he prepared lunch for her. He wasn't the best cook, but he was slowly working on it. He placed everything inside a lunch box and wrapped it with a green cloth he had. Ochako, he called out, as she was preparing to head out. Yes, she responded from the entrance. Here, he said while going towards her, I made this for you. You did, Ochako said while looking at the box that Izuku was passing on to her. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day, he smiled brightly, and that you enjoy your lunch. I'm sure I will. Thank you, Izuku. She went up to him and kissed his cheek. I'll see you later. Izuku waved as his girlfriend left the building. He really hoped she liked the lunch he had put together. He tried to put as much care into it as he could, but he wasn't very good at it. He pondered if his lunch was too bad for Ochako, but then decided that he had already given it to her, so there wasn't much he could do about it. He then went back into the kitchen to prepare everything he needed for his bakery. Hours later, when Izuku had already sold out everything for the afternoon, he closed up the shop again. The day had been as any other. He had sold out completely both in the morning and in the afternoon. He was cleaning up the counter when he heard a knock on the door. Coming, Izuku said. He wasn't expecting anyone, and Ochako wouldn't be back for another hour, so he wondered who it might be. He reached the door and saw a large silhouette on the other side. Something about it seemed familiar, but he could not pinpoint what exactly. Izuku, he heard Ochako exclaim from the other side, open up. It's me. He unlocked the door and stepped back to let Ochako in, except that it wasn't her who walked in instead. It was his old idol who had once given him his dream to become a hero. It was the number one hero, All Might. WWWWH. WH what? Izuku wondered out loud. WWYA are you? He couldn't really process exactly who was in front of him at that moment. He had never actually seen his idol in person ever. Hello, young man. All Might's voice was loud yet warm. Do you have any bread left? I was recommended this bakery by a great young lady. I. Izuku realized he had sold every last piece. Don't. Sorry. He looked down, incredibly disappointed in himself for having failed his idol. Well then, All Might responded easily. I can just come back tomorrow. Will you save me a piece? Oh, of course. Izuku's eyes suddenly lit up. I'd be glad to. Thank you, young man. All Might smiled brightly. Our young Midoriya was it. Why yes. Izuku was at a complete loss for words. He could not believe that All Might, his idol, knew his name. I have actually come here to thank you for something else, he said suddenly, looking a bit more serious than he did before. What is it? Izuku had no idea what could he have done for the number one hero. I heard that you saved this young lady some time ago. He gestured to Ochako, who had also come in and was now looking at the two. For that, you have my sincere thanks. Izuku was, for the third time in a row, completely out of things to utter. I, I know you don't have a license or anything, All Might continued as he placed his hand on top of Izuku's head, but you'd make a mighty good hero, young Midoriya. Why, you really think so? Was all Izuku could get out. Absolutely. It was Ochako who spoke this time. You're my hero, Izuku. He couldn't take it anymore and began to cry uncontrollably. That was all he ever needed to hear in his life, and he had finally heard it where stories live. Discover now.